The noblewomen of the capital always sighed with envy whenever they saw me. Lady Shen, you are so blessed. A man like the Marquess, you are the only one in his eyes, in his heart. I always just smiled and said nothing. That Xiaojing, the Marquess of Dingbei, loved me, this was common knowledge throughout the capital. 7 years of marriage, no concubines, no kept women. He brought me to every banquet without exception. Even when meeting with advisors in his study, he always left one window half open, saying he needed to be able to catch a glimpse of me at any moment. Wherever Zixia is, that is where my heart is. When he said it, his gaze was steady, his voice low and certain. Even the advisors standing nearby were moved. I had been moved too, until today. Hey queens, Elena here. Okay, imagine this. You've been married for 7 years to the perfect husband, the kind of man who leaves his study window half open just so he can catch a glimpse of you, the absolute standard of devotion, until one day you realize that window was actually a secret drop-off point for his hidden pregnant mistress's prescriptions, and after you catch him, he comes home and draws your eyebrows with a straight face. Buckle up, queens. Let's watch a masterclass in burning the past to build an empire. I was 2 months along. The pregnancy had stabilized enough that I decided to brave the snow and travel to Cyan Temple outside the city, to pray for a talisman to keep Xiaojing safe. The fighting in the northern frontier hadn't stopped. He rode out every few months, and I wanted to give him something to carry a small peace of mind. The temple was busy, loud, with incense smoke and pilgrims. I slipped away to the quieter hills behind the main hall and wandered along a row of meditation cells. The snow was falling hard. The silence around me was almost unnatural. Then I heard the voice low, rough, a voice I knew better than my own. What is wrong? Afraid I'll hurt you? My feet stopped. The door to one of the cells was open a crack. Through that crack, I saw everything with perfect clarity. The Marquess of Dingbei, the man who was supposed to be in court that very morning, arguing fiercely over the northern campaign, was bent over a woman, his hands moving with tender care across the high, round swell of her belly. His eyes held a hunger and devotion I had never once seen him turn on me in 7 years. The woman spoke in a soft, coy voice. My lord, be gentle, don't hurt the baby. I recognized her. Yu Jiao, 3 years ago, she had come to the household as a servant, the daughter of a fallen military family, she'd said, volunteering herself. She'd been placed in the side courtyard. I had always assumed she was nothing more than a passing act of charity on Xiaojing's part. I pressed my hand hard over my mouth. My nails drove into my palm. The taste of blood spread across my tongue. I didn't go in, no tears, no accusations, no hysterics. Not like the foolish girl I'd been 7 years ago. I simply turned around, rigid as a marionette, and walked back to the carriage 1 step at a time. The snow was deep. Each step sank almost to my knees. By the time I returned to the estate, Xiaojing had beaten me home. He was warming his hands over the brazier when he heard my footsteps. He turned immediately, brow furrowing. What took you so long? The snow is terrible out there. Why didn't you come back sooner? He crossed the room, picked up the spiral indigo pencil from the dressing table with practiced ease, and tilted my chin up gently to draw my eyebrows. My mind was on you the entire time in court today. His voice was low, carrying just enough reproach to feel like tenderness. Only now, seeing you, only now does my heart settle. The warm pad of his thumb traced my brow bone with exquisite care. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I truly would have believed this man loved me to his bones. I dropped my gaze to his waist. Where is your white jade pendant? The pendant had been blessed by a high monk. Xiaojing wore it against his body always, never without it. The hand drawing my brow paused barely half a second, and then he was smiling again, his expression perfectly composed. I knocked it against the white marble steps on my way out of court, chipped it beyond saving. His tone was casual. I'll have the storeroom find a better one tomorrow. I looked at that face of his performance without a single crack and felt my stomach turn. I closed my eyes. I didn't expose him. I simply crossed out, quietly, in my heart, the very last thread of doubt I'd been holding on to. Late that night, I lay beside Xiaojing, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, From beyond the half-open window came the faintest sound. "My lord, urgent message." The shadow guard's voice was barely a whisper. Xiao Jing's eyes opened in an instant, with movements so careful they barely disturbed the air. He peeled back the covers, terrified of waking me, pulled on his outer robe, and padded barefoot to the window. Through half-closed eyes, I watched by the thin light of the moon. The guard passed a folded slip of paper through the window. Xiao Jing opened it. His brow snapped together. He moved quickly to the writing desk, lit the oil lamp, picked up his brush, and began covering the paper in dense, urgent annotations. In that dim, amber light, I could read what was written on the slip. It was a prescription for protecting a pregnancy. I gripped the bedding beneath me until my knuckles ached. 7 years. This window, the one he claimed to leave half open so he could always see me, had been their private channel all along. 7 years of it. Xiao Jing held the annotated slip over the candle flame and watched it burn to ash. He let out a long, slow breath. I closed my eyes and, one by one, tore apart every illusion I had ever built around these 7 years. Xiao Jing, I finally see you clearly, the next morning. The moment he left, I slipped out of the Marquess's estate under the pretense of visiting a physician for the pregnancy. The carriage wound through a dozen back streets before stopping at the rear entrance of an out-of-the-way clinic on the edge of the city. I went in wearing a veiled hat, my most trusted maid at my elbow. In the inner room sat a young man in a pale moon-white robe, Shen Guizhou, a rising star at the Imperial Medical Bureau. We had grown up together, childhood friends who knew each other's every secret. The only person in this world I trusted without reservation, Zixia. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face, and immediately rose to usher me to a seat. "The weather is terrible out there. Why did you come yourself? Is something wrong with the pregnancy?" I removed my veil, no preamble. I dismissed everyone else from the room. "Guizhou," I said, meeting his eyes directly, "I need a medicine." I spoke each word with deliberate care, something that mimics the signs of a hemorrhage, a false death. A crash, and Guizhou shot to his feet, knocking over the teacup beside him. Scalding tea splashed across the floor. His face was disbelief itself, but his voice came out urgent and low. "Are you out of your mind? Do you have any idea what that drug does to a body? You are pregnant." "I know. Has Xiao Jing hurt you?" His hands balled into fists at his sides, knuckles going white. "If he has laid a hand on you, I'll go to that estate right now and drag you out myself. I'll throw away my position if I have to. It won't work." I cut him off with a tired smile. "He hasn't hurt me. He has been perfect. That is the problem." I told him everything, what I had seen through the crack in the meditation cell door and what I had read on that prescription slip in the middle of the night. No embellishment, no tears, the way you'd recount something that happened to a stranger. By the time I finished, Shen Guizhou was shaking. "That bastard." He slammed his fist on the table, eyes red. "How dare he treat you this way?" The Marquess's estate is heavily guarded. He will never simply let me go. Without this, I'll spend the rest of my life locked in that gilded cage, watching my child call that woman second mother. I rose and bowed to him, a full, formal bow. "Please help me." He reached out to stop me, his hands hovering, and finally settled for the lightest possible touch at my wrist as he lifted me back up. He drew a long breath, the anguish in his eyes hardened into resolve. "Zixia," he looked at me steadily, "give me 7 days, 7 days, and I'll have the medicine in your hands. I'll arrange everything you need on the outside as well." "Thank you," I said. When I returned to the estate, the snow had stopped. I didn't go back to the main courtyard. I dismissed my attendants and walked alone to the base of the wall that bordered the side courtyard. It was a deliberately hidden corner of the estate, desolate from the outside, but a different world within. I looked through the latticed window cut into the wall. Inside, a brazier burned high and hot. Yu Jiao was reclining on a daybed piled thick with fox fur, the picture of comfort. I saw what was on her wrist immediately, a string of red agate prayer beads, the ones I had gone to Daxiangguo Temple for last year, walking the entire approach on my knees, one prostration for every step. 108 kowtows in all, to pray for Xiaojing's safe return from the frontier. Those beads, soaked in my devotion, were now on the wrist of his hidden mistress, and on her swollen belly, propped there for warmth, sat a pair of tiny embroidered tiger head shoes. The tigers on those shoes were stitched so carefully they seemed alive. I had sewn them myself, ruining my eyes over the work, stitch by stitch, for the child not yet born. Xiaojing stood beside her. He didn't stop any of it. He bent down and tucked the slipping blanket back around her with quiet, attentive care. "My lord," Yu Zhao called to him in that soft, honeyed voice, her fingers stroking the little shoes. "These shoes the lady made are so soft. When our baby comes, they'll look wonderful on him." Something flickered across Xiaojing's face, a brief stiffening, but it passed, and the tenderness returned. "As long as you are happy," he murmured it like a comfort, reaching out to rest his hand on her belly. "Just give me this child safely, and I'll give you whatever you want." I stood on the other side of the wall and watched. The rough bricks scraped open the skin of my fingertips. Blood seeped into the mortar. I felt nothing, so this is what it is when a heart dies completely. You can't even cry. I turned and walked back to the main courtyard. With every step, I told myself, "Shen Jixia, don't look back. He isn't worth it." That evening, I sat by the canopied bed in my inner chamber. "Nanny," I called for the head attendant, keeping my voice even. "Please bring me those little garments and tiger head shoes I sewed last week. I'd like to go over the stitching again." The woman's face shifted. She dropped to her knees with a thud, and then just knelt there, stammering, unable to move. "What is it?" I lifted my teacup and skimmed the surface. My lady." She wouldn't raise her head. Her voice trembled. "The Marquess said the fabric on those garments was so fine, and the stitching so careful, that he had them sent to the embroidery room as patterns for the seamstresses." "Patterns." I laughed, a short, cold sound. "The Marquess's estate kept the finest embroiderers in the capital. What pattern could they possibly need from a piece of my handiwork? He had taken what I made with my own hands and given it to the woman he was hiding, a gift, a comfort, a way to keep her content. He thought that as long as he kept the secret well enough, he could have both the dignity of a proper wife and the sweetness of a hidden lover." "Understood. You may go." The attendant fled the room as if pardoned from execution. Silence settled back over the chamber. I rested my hand on my belly, still not showing, and looked at myself in the bronze mirror on the dressing table. The woman looking back wore a calm face and eyes cold as ice water. "Xiaojing, you'll never know that you just snuffed out the last mercy I had left for you. 7 days, 7 more days." Those 7 days passed over the Marquess's estate. Like still water, Xiaojing kept playing the devoted husband without missing a beat. He came home from court on time every evening, shared meals with me, drew my eyebrows, and even while working through military dispatches kept that half-open window as faithfully as ever. Once I would have been undone by all of it. No, it made my skin crawl. I didn't cry, I didn't confront him. I smiled at him more warmly than I ever had before, because I knew a hunter never startles the prey before the net closes. I used those 7 days to quietly gather every piece of evidence of his betrayal. Each night, when the shadow guard passed a slip through the half-open window, and Xiaojing bent urgently over his writing desk, I watched from behind the bed curtains without blinking. The next morning, after he left for court, I would go into his study. He was arrogant enough to think I never touched his work. His guard was almost non-existent. I would open the top sheet of paper on his desk, take the softest charcoal pencil I owned, and rub it lightly across the page beneath the one he had pressed, hard enough to leave impressions. The indentations rose up through the white paper like ghosts. 2 liang of premium blood swallow, to be decocted with the pregnancy stabilizing formula. Yu Zhao is sensitive to cold. Retrieve the white fox pelt from the storeroom at once. I looked at these rubbings without expression, folded them neatly, and locked them in the false bottom of my jewelry case. As for the white jade pendant he claimed to have chipped on the marble steps, I tracked that down too. Under the guise of reviewing household accounts, I applied a little pressure to the head attendant. She went pale and let something slip. The pendant, blessed by a high monk, meant to suppress ill fortune and protect the household, had been hung by Xiaojing himself above the door of the side courtyard. A prayer for the child in Yu Zhao's womb. The entire estate knew, the steward, the attendants, every last one of them. Only I, the mistress of this house, had been played for a fool for 7 straight years. Those 7 days, I stripped away every last feeling I had for Xiaojing, and every last pretense this estate had ever worn, and looked at what was underneath. On the 5th night, I had a nightmare so vivid, it felt like a premonition. In the dream, Yu Zhao was writhing on the ground, clutching her belly, screaming that I was a poisoner, and Xiaojing, eyes bloodshot, face twisted into something monstrous, had his hands around my throat, forcing a bowl of scalding abortifacient between my lips. Jixia, Yu Zhao is too fragile, she can't lose this child. You are strong, we can always have more. The Xiaojing in the dream looked like a demon wearing a man's face. No, I wrenched awake, gasping, my inner robe soaked through with cold sweat. Jixia, what is wrong? A voice urgent, close to my ear. I turned in the faint candlelight. I saw Xiaojing. He was sitting on the edge of the bed in a thin robe, both hands wrapped around mine. His forehead was damp with sweat. His fingers were trembling slightly. A nightmare. He reached up to wipe the perspiration from my brow. I turned my head away on instinct. His hand stopped in midair. I am fine. My voice came out flat. He withdrew his hand. His eyes shifted, and when he spoke, there was something almost imperceptibly guilty underneath the words. I just heard from the guard that some stray cats were making noise near the side courtyard. I was going to check on it, but then I heard you cry out, and I couldn't leave. He had been caught between going to Yu Zhao and staying with me. In the end, instinct had kept him at my bedside. I looked at him, at the worry in his eyes, at the faint trembling in his shoulders. I felt no anger, only a clean, absolute, perfectly quiet revulsion. He wasn't performing, he genuinely cared. And that was precisely what made it so nauseating. He believed that as long as he gave his wife enough face and enough tenderness, he was entitled to seek his thrills elsewhere. He had split his heart in two and called himself devoted. He thought that made him a romantic. My lord, I pulled my hand free. My voice was as smooth as still water. I really am fine. If you are worried about the cats disturbing the household, please go and see to it. Xiaojing blinked. He clearly hadn't expected that. The tension in his shoulders visibly released, and something unmistakably eager flashed through his eyes. Then rest well. I'll be right back. He tucked the covers around me, threw on his cloak, and walked quickly out of the courtyard. I lay in the cold canopied bed and listened to his footsteps fade. The corner of my mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Go, Xiaojing. Go keep watch over your precious concubine. This is the last time you'll ever get to perform for me. The 7th day dusk, snow came again, drifting down in thick curtains over the red walls and green tiles of the capital. Me most trusted maid slipped back inside and shut the door behind her. From her sleeve she produced a small, plain black ceramic vial and held it out to me with both hands. My lady, sent by Master Shen, his man was careful no one saw. I took the vial. It was cold in my palm. I tipped it open. Inside, a single dark red pill. This was the false death medicine Shen Guizhou had promised. Once swallowed, it would produce all the signs of a catastrophic hemorrhage and premature labor. Within 3 hours, breath and pulse would vanish entirely indistinguishable from death. After 12 hours, life would slowly return. The process, I was told, was agony, like walking to the gates of hell and back. But holding that pill, I felt as though I were holding the key to my own rebirth. I walked to the window and pushed it open, that window, the one that had stood half open for years. Bone-cutting wind and snow rushed in, scattering the stale warmth of the brazier. In the distance, the side courtyard glowed with soft, warm light. I closed my fingers around the pill and looked out at the darkening sky. My voice was barely a breath. Xiaojing, tomorrow we settle our accounts. The 8th day the snow had stopped. The plum blossoms in the estate's rear garden were at their peak. I walked among them in my cloak, a maid at my arm. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Near a decorative rockery, Yu Zhao appeared, no maid with her, just herself, Belly leading the way, wrapped in the finest white fox fur cloak from Xiaojing's storeroom, a white peacock, preening and deliberate, blocking my path. "Good day, my lady." She dipped into something that was more provocation than curtsy. "The plum blossoms are lovely today, aren't they? My lord was saying just last night that he'd cut a few branches to put by my bed." I looked at her. Still water, no anger, no jealousy. Only the mild pity one might feel for someone who doesn't yet know they're already finished. "Move." I had no interest in this. Yu Jiao's expression shifted. She hadn't expected that. In her version of this scene, I was either a fool who didn't know what was happening, or a jealous wife who would unravel at the first provocation. She bit her lip and stepped forward, grabbing my sleeve. "My lady," she said, dropping her voice to something venomous. "Don't you want to know what my lord said about you last night, in my room? He said you are too proper, like a block of wood. He said I am the only place he feels like a real man." I looked at the hand on my sleeve, then I smiled. "You are overplaying it." The instant I made contact, Yu Jiao let out a sharp scream and fell backward. Aha, my stomach. She hit the snow hard, clutching her belly, rolling in apparent agony. Blood bloomed red against the white beneath her. "Yu Jiao!" A howl of fury from behind the rockery. Xiaojing came at a dead run, eyes wild and red like a man possessed. He shoved me aside hard enough that I stumbled and nearly fell and threw himself down beside Yu Jiao, pulling her into his arms, his shaking hands pressing against the blood spreading beneath her. "My lord," the lady, she pushed me. Yu Jiao clutched his lapels, her face ashen, tears streaming beautifully down her cheeks. "Save our baby, please." Xiaojing turned his head and looked at me. The disbelief in his eyes, the fury. "Shen Jixia, why?" He was shouting. "She has done nothing to you. If you have grievances, bring them to me. Why would you hurt my child?" I stood where I was and watched him perform his devastation. The last ripple in me went still. I didn't push her. I stated it plainly. "Don't lie to me. I saw you brush her hand away." His reason had been entirely consumed. He pointed at me, teeth clenched. "Shen Jixia, you have disappointed me." Disappointed. I almost laughed. Yes, I had disappointed him. I had failed to remain the obedient, unknowing puppet he needed me to be. At that moment, a wave of violent pain tore through my abdomen. The false death medicine beginning its work. It hit like every organ being ripped apart at once. My legs gave out. I dropped to my knees in the snow. "My lady!" My maid cried out and lunged to catch me. A rush of warmth flooded from beneath me. Me water had broken. "My lord, the lady is in labor." The maid was screaming, trying to reach him. Xiaojing looked back. He saw me kneeling in the snow, white as paper. Then he looked at Yu Jiao, barely conscious in his arms. Something moved through his eyes. He made his choice. He gathered Yu Jiao up and ran for the side courtyard without looking back. "You are strong, you'll hold on. I'll send the estate physician to you immediately." His voice dissolved into the wind and snow. I watched him go. I didn't call after him. I didn't ask him to stay. I reached into my sleeve and took out the dark red pill. I placed it on my tongue. It dissolved instantly. A coal dropped into the chest, burning all the way down. Pain the kind that splits you open, but I was smiling. "Xiaojing, this is the choice you made. You left me and your child for that woman. So from this moment forward we are done. Every debt between us, paid in full 3 hours later. A fire broke out in the main courtyard of the Marquess of Dingbei's estate. Fed by the wind, it swallowed the entire compound in moments. By the time Xiaojing arrived, the courtyard was a wall of flame. Zixia!" He lunged toward the fire like a madman and had to be physically restrained by his guards. "My lord, you cannot, the fire is too strong." It burned through the night. By dawn, the flames had finally died. Xiaojing dug through the ruins with his bare hands. His palms were torn open and bleeding, but he seemed not to notice. At last, in the place where the bed had stood, he uncovered a body, burned beyond recognition. On the wrist of the charred remains, half a jade bracelet scorched black, but still there, the betrothal gift he had given me. "Jixia!" Xiaojing knelt before the remains. His voice was the sound of a broken bellows. Tears fell in the ash. In the corner of the ruins, a guard found a small iron box that hadn't fully burned. Inside, a letter Xiaojing's hands shook as he opened it. 7 characters, written in a clear and delicate hand and utterly without mercy. 7 years of lies. Today, where even Xiaojing stared at those 7 words. Then he vomited blood and collapsed into the ruins. Meanwhile, on a fast-moving carriage outside the city walls, I lay drenched in sweat on the cushioned berth Shen Guizhou had arranged. Every breath a labor. A clear, fierce cry split the darkness before dawn. "He is here, my lady, it is a boy." The midwife's voice rang out with joy. I opened my eyes, exhausted to my marrow, and looked at the small, wrinkled, furious little life in her arms. The tears came then, all at once, unstoppable. I made it. My child made it. I reached up and touched the gold longevity locket at my throat, Shen Guizhou's gift to the baby, sent ahead of time. I closed my eyes. Goodbye, Dingbei Marquis's estate. Goodbye, Xiaojing. 3 years later, Jiangnan, Suzhou, spring rain fell in a steady curtain, tapping against the blue-grey flagstones with a clean, bright sound. I sat in the private room on the 2nd floor of Shen's apothecary, fingers moving quickly across the abacus, reconciling last month's accounts. Mama Cake, a small boy in a blue brocade jacket, round-cheeked and bright-eyed, the picture of a child carved from jade, came toddling over on sturdy little legs and held up a half-eaten osmanthus cake. Me son, Shen Nianan. I set down the abacus, took out a handkerchief, wiped the crumbs from the corner of his mouth and ruffled his hair. Good boy, go play with Nanny. Mama still has accounts to finish. Nianan nodded obediently and pattered back out. I watched his lively little figure disappear, then picked up my tea and took a slow sip 3 years ago. With Shen Guizhou's help, I had faked my death and slipped out of the capital, traveling south until I reached the prosperous city of Suzhou. I hadn't touched a single coin of Shen Guizhou's money. I started with the savings I'd quietly set aside since girlhood, combined with everything I knew about medicinal herbs, and built from a small market stall up until I had taken over the largest shop front in Suzhou and become the merchant everyone in the Jiangnan Trade Guild knew simply as Boss Shen. The identity I'd left behind in the capital had burned to ash in that fire. The door to the private room swung open with a creak. Shen Guizhou came in out of the rain, shaking out his oiled paper umbrella, and crossed the room in a few long strides. He had resigned his post at the Imperial Medical Bureau years ago and become a travelling physician, spending most of each year in Jiangnan, keeping an eye on the apothecary's operations. Guizhou, have some tea first, warm up. I passed him a cup. He took it but didn't drink. He looked at me, his expression complicated. Xixia, there is news from the capital. My fingers paused on the account book, then I turned the page. Go ahead, Xiaojing has lost his mind. Shen Guizhou pulled out a chair and sat down, his voice low. After the fire 3 years ago, he found the jewelry case you left in the ruins. The bottom layer hadn't fully burned, he saw the rubbings. I let out a short, cold laugh. Those rubbings every blood swallow, every fox pelt, every secret errand documented in his own hand. He finally understood that the performance he thought was airtight had been seen through from the very beginning, that you had watched him play the devoted husband for 7 days straight. The way you'd watch a clown. Shen Guizhou's eyes flickered with something close to satisfaction. And Yu Zhao. Yu Zhao went into early labor. The child was stillborn. He paused. Xiaojing later confirmed that her fall in the snow that day had nothing to do with you. She'd thrown herself down deliberately to frame you. He drew his sword on the spot and cut off one of her legs, had her locked in the woodshed in the side courtyard. 1 bowl of sour rice a day, a living death. He looked at me and continued, as for Xiaojing himself, he hasn't taken a single concubine in 3 years. He kept the main courtyard exactly as the fire left it, ruins and all. Every night he sleeps in the charred wreckage, holding what is left of your jade bracelet. People in the capital say the Marquess of Dingbei had his mind burned out in the fire, that he has become a living ghost. I listened to all of this. My heart was perfectly still, no savage triumph, Not one flicker of pity. What happens to him is no concern of mine. I closed the account book and looked up at Shen Guizhou. Honestly, I am more interested in tomorrow's tender. The court was building a Southern Ocean fleet and needed large quantities of premium wound medicine and cold weather remedies. The Jiangnan governor's office was holding an open tender the next day to select a single apothecary as the official imperial supplier win that contract. And Shen's apothecary would have the protection of the government behind it. My foothold in Jiangnan would be permanent. After that, even if someone from the capital recognized me, there would be nothing they could do. Don't worry. Shen Guizhou saw the clarity in my eyes and smiled with something like admiration. Our formula is the improved version. The clotting speed alone there is nothing in all of Jiangnan that comes close. The next day, the Jiangnan governor's office, the main hall, was packed with the most prominent medicine merchants in the region. I sat in the front row wearing a light veil, spine straight. The men around me kept shooting dismissive glances my way. In their world, a woman who showed her face in public had no business competing at their table. I didn't waste a single look on them. After one incense stick's worth of time, the governor emerged from the back hall, escorting a young official in a dark brocade robe. Gentlemen, today's tender will be decided personally by the imperial envoy, sent directly from the capital. The governor stepped respectfully to the side. The imperial envoy took the seat of honor behind a half-translucent bead curtain. With the light behind him, I couldn't make out his face, only his long fingers resting on the arm of the chair. The knuckles pale, the tender began. One merchant after another stepped forward to present their wound medicines. The imperial envoy didn't speak, didn't move. Then it was my turn. I rose and walked to the center of the hall without hurrying. Shen's apothecary, Shen Xia, greetings to the imperial envoy. My voice was clear and steady. No deference, no performance. Rather than launching into a speech like the others, I reached up, pulled a silver hairpin from my hair, and drew it across my left forearm. Blood welled up immediately. A sharp intake of breath ran through the hall. I didn't flinch. With one hand, I uncapped the medicine vial and tapped white powder onto the wound. 3 breaths. The blood stopped. A thin, clean scab had already formed. Please observe, my lord. I raised my arm. Shen's wound medicine clots 3 times faster than the standard formula. The ingredients are inexpensive and easy to source in bulk, ideal for military use at scale. The hall went silent. Every person in it had been stopped cold by the efficiency of the demonstration and the speed of the result. Behind the bead curtain, the pale fingers resting on the chair arms suddenly clenched. Impressive. Quite impressive, bossed Shen. A low, rough voice came through the curtain, like sandpaper dragged slowly across wood. That voice. My heart lurched, blood rushed to my head in an instant. A hand with prominent knuckles reached out and pushed the bead curtain aside. The man in the dark brocade robe stepped forward. 3 years had hollowed him out. He was gaunt to the point of being unrecognizable, eyes sunken deep, and threading through what had once been jet-black hair were unmistakable streaks of white. In his hand, gripped as though his life depended on it, was half a jade bracelet, burned black. Those eyes laced through with red fixed on my face like a starving wolf's, like he wanted to swallow me whole. The medicine works remarkably well. I'll grant you that. Xiaojing walked toward me. Each step carried a suffocating weight. He stopped half a pace away, and when he spoke again, his voice was shaking so badly it was nearly unrecognizable. But if someone has had a piece of their heart carved out, does Boss Shen's medicine have a cure for that? I looked at him slowly. I lowered my arm. The hall was dead silent. Every person in it had stopped breathing, watching this imperial envoy from the capital walk up to a merchant woman with red-rimmed eyes and ask her something that made no sense to anyone else in the room. I looked at Xiaojing. Those eyes, once always carrying that particular brand of high, warm tenderness, were now threaded with blood and drowning in desperation. He stared at me as though if I simply nodded, he would shatter to his knees on the flagstones right then and there. What a shame. I was not the Shen Zixia of 3 years ago, the one whose entire world had been him. I stepped back half a pace, opening a distance that was polite and absolute. Then I folded my hands and gave him the formal bow of a merchant. The envoy flatters me. I raised my head. My eyes were clear. My voice didn't waver by a fraction. Shen's apothecary sells wound medicine. We treat injuries from blades and arrows. If your lordship's heart is damaged, broken, hollowed out, that is a matter for a physician who specializes in internal ailments, not for a humble merchant like myself. It landed like a slap across the face, clean and unhurried. Xiao Jing's tall frame swayed. The color drained from his face completely. He had expected fury tears, a torrent of accusations about his cruelty and betrayal. What he had not expected was to be looked at like a stranger on the street while someone calmly tried to sell him medicine. His lips trembled. He seemed to reach for my shoulder, but the moment his hand met my gaze, he froze. The merchants around them had begun to murmur. The governor, sensing the atmosphere curdling, stepped forward to smooth things over. Imperial envoy regarding Shen's medicine Xiao Jing drew a long breath and forced the wildness back behind his eyes. He gripped the half-burned bracelet until the tendons on the back of his hand stood out like cords. Shen's medicine is without question the finest here. He bit the words out one by one. The military supply contract for the Southern Ocean Fleet goes to Shen's apothecary. Tomorrow at noon, Boss Shen will please bring the contract documents to my quarters at the post station to finalize the seal. He held my gaze for one long moment. Then he turned and walked out of the governor's office in long, rapid strides. That retreating figure, for all its authority, had the unmistakable look of a man in flight. I stood where I was, and the corner of my mouth curved, summoning me alone to the post station. Is that supposed to frighten me, Xiao Jing? Do you really think I am still afraid of you? Back at the apothecary, I told Shen Guizhou about the contract. His brow furrowed immediately. He recognized you. That post-station meeting tomorrow is a trap. Let me go in your place to finalize the documents. Number, I'll go myself. I slid the drafted contract into its wooden case. Guizhou, if I don't have the courage to face him, how am I supposed to hold my ground in Jiangnan? Running away only tells him I still care. I needed him to understand, once and for all, that Shen Jixia was dead. The woman standing in front of him now was Shen Shao, a merchant, and an unbreakable one. The next day at noon, I arrived at the post station on time with the contract. A guard led me to Xiao Jing's room. The moment I stepped through the door, I stopped. The room had been arranged to be an exact replica of my study at the Dingbei estate, the rosewood writing table, the celadon vase. Even the ink painting of winter plum blossoms hanging by the window reproduced down to the last brushstroke. Xiao Jing stood at the writing table in a plain white robe. He turned at the sound of my footsteps. Sixia. His voice was rough, tentative, with a careful, almost pleading quality. You are here. Do you see the room? I had it arranged exactly the way you always liked it. You used to say the plum blossoms in Jiangnan lack the backbone of the ones in the capital, so I had someone bring these all the way from Imperial Envoy. I cut him off and set the wooden case down on the writing table with a firm click. I am here to sign a military supply contract. If we're conducting business, we can begin now. If your lordship wishes to reminisce, then I've come to the wrong room. Good day. I turned to leave. Don't go, Xiao Jing panicked. He crossed the room in 2 strides and put himself between me and the door. Then he did something I hadn't expected. He held out both hands, palms up. They were a ruin, crisscrossed with scars, some of them raised and ugly, the skin in places twisted into dead flesh. Nothing remained of the elegant hands that had once held a brush or plucked a chin string. Jixia look. His tears finally broke free, falling onto those ruined palms. I dug through the ruins of that fire with my bare hands 3 days and 3 nights. My fingers wore down to the bone. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. His knees buckled. He went down in front of me with a sound like something breaking. The Marquess of Dingbei, the Emperor's own envoy, on his knees before a merchant woman. The child, Yu Zhao's child, was stillborn. That was my punishment. I deserved it. I've had her locked in the woodshed ever since. Made her suffer every day, all of it for you. Sixia, come back to the capital with me. You are and always will be the only mistress of the Marquess's estate. I swear on my life, I will never look at another woman again. He looked up at her with the face of a drowning man, offering his self-inflicted wounds and his belated devotion as currency, hoping to buy one small measure of her pity. I looked down at him, at this man reduced to begging at my feet, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, only a vast, almost serene sense of the absurd. Xiao Jing. My voice was quiet in the empty room. Do you believe that if you punish yourself enough, if you deal with the woman on the side, I am obligated to forgive you? He stared up at me, tears blurring his vision. You tore your hands up in the ruins. That was your own foolishness. You tormented Yu Jiao. That was between the two of you. I bent down until I was level with his eyes, and I spoke each word with the precision of a blade. For 3 years, I have worked every single day to build something better. I have not thought of you once. Devotion that arrives this late is worth less than weeds. That performance of remorse you are giving me right now, it just makes me sick. Xiao Jing looked as though he'd been struck by lightning. Every last trace of color left his face. He sagged where he knelt, as if every string holding him upright had been cut at once. He understood finally and completely that no matter what he did, the Shen Zixia who had once looked at him like he was her whole world was gone forever. I straightened up, pushed the contract across the table, and held out a loaded brush. Imperial Envoy, your signature, please. I have staff waiting back at the shop for their wages. Xiao Jing's hand shook so badly as he took the brush that ink dripped onto the paper, blooming into a dark, spreading stain. He signed his name, pressed his official seal. I took the contract, turned around, and walked out of the post station without looking back once. Outside, the rain had cleared. Sunlight hit the wet stones and made them blaze. I breathed in deeply. The air in Jiangnan had never tasted so clean. I was about to step down from the entrance when a bright, small voice rang out from across the street. "Mama?" I spun around. Nianan, 3 years old, having wriggled free of his nanny's hand, was running toward me across the street. A candied hawthorn skewer held triumphantly overhead, his little legs going as fast as they could carry him. My breath stopped. Behind me, the post station door swung open in the wind. Xiao Jing, who had dragged himself upright against the doorframe, lifted his head at the sound. His gaze landed on Nianan's face. A face that carried 7 parts of his own features. Xiao Jing's pupils dilated. In those dead, hollow eyes, something ignited, something close to madness. The wind swept fallen leaves across the post station steps. "Mama," Nianan's voice rang like a silver bell and detonated in my ears. I didn't hesitate for a single breath. I flew down the steps, swept him into my arms, and pulled my wide cloak around him, covering his face completely. "Nianan, be still. Don't make a sound." I kept my voice low and steady, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. My eyes went to ice. Behind me, footsteps urgent, uneven. Xiao Jing came off the steps like a gust of wind and planted himself directly in my path. "Zixia." His voice was barely holding together. Those bloodshot eyes were locked on the shape hidden beneath my cloak. That is my child, isn't it? 3 years ago, you didn't take an abortifacient, you took the false death medicine. You ran, and you took my child with you. The despair that had filled his eyes moments ago was gone. In its place, a frantic, almost unhinged joy, a drowning man who had just found a rope. He reached out with those scarred, trembling hands toward the edge of my cloak. "Let me see him. Let me hold my son crack." A slap full force. Nothing held back, snapped his head to the side. Blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. The bystanders on the street and the guards at the post station all went rigid. The Imperial Envoy struck across the face, in public by a merchant woman. "Don't touch my son with the same hands you've put on other women." I looked at him with eyes like drawn steel. "Xiao Jing, are you having another episode? This is my son, Shen Xiao's son. He has nothing to do with the Dingbei Marquis's estate. Not 1 copper's worth." Xiao Jing turned his head back slowly. He wasn't angry. He almost smiled a smile so distorted it was painful to look at. Deny it all you want, his face, his age, they don't lie. He raised his voice to a command. "Guards, escort the lady and the young master inside. No one leaves without my order." Xing, the post station guards drew their blades and closed in around me in a ring. Xiao Jing looked at me, and something of his old authority crept back into his voice. Jixia, stop fighting. Come back to the capital. Nianan is the legitimate firstborn son of the Marquess's estate. I'll give him everything. As for your unauthorized departure, I won't pursue it. Not a word. He thought that in this unfamiliar city, with official power behind him, a woman alone would have no choice but to fold. He had miscalculated badly. I didn't step back. I reached into my sleeve and pulled out the military supply contract, the one he had signed not 20 minutes ago, snapped it open, and held it above my head. The bright red official seal blazed in the sunlight. Open your eyes and read carefully. My voice cut through the entire street. I am the imperial supplier, personally certified and sealed by the Jiangnan governor's office and the imperial envoy himself. Shen's apothecary is the sole provider of wound medicine for 30,000 soldiers of the Southern Ocean Fleet. I swept my gaze across the ring of drawn blades. Under the laws of this dynasty, anyone who unlawfully detains an imperial military supplier and obstructs military operations is charged with treason. The penalty is immediate execution. Which one of you wants to test that? The guards exchanged glances. The hands holding the blades had begun to tremble. One by one, they took a half-step back. The Southern Ocean Fleet was the Emperor's most prized military project. Not one of them had the nerve to carry the charge of obstructing its supply chain. You are using the contract against me. Xiao Jing's face darkened, jaw tight. And what of it? I held his gaze without flinching. Xiao Jing, this is Suzhou, Jiangnan. This is not your estate in the capital where you answer to no one. If you abduct a civilian woman in broad daylight, the memorials accusing you of abusing your authority and sabotaging military supply will be stacked on the Emperor's desk by morning. Ask yourself, will he protect a minister who has lost his mind, or 30,000 soldiers of his Southern Ocean Fleet? Xiao Jing's fists clenched so hard his knuckles cracked. He hadn't seen it coming. The contract he had signed in that room, the one he thought was simply a business formality, had become the weapon she was now using to dismantle his authority piece by piece. She had planned for this. She had laid the groundwork before she ever walked through his door. Just as the standoff reached its breaking point, the sound of hoofbeats came rolling down the street. Shen Guizhou arrived at the head of several dozen broad-shouldered apothecary guards, moving fast and with purpose. I'd like to see someone try. He swung down from his horse and stepped in front of me, fixing Xiao Jing with a cold, level stare. Imperial Envoy, the Jiangnan Merchant Guild, stands together. If you want to fight, Shen's apothecary has several hundred people on staff who are not known for their patience. The crowd of bystanders had grown thick, and the murmuring was getting louder. Is this what they send from the capital, coming here to snatch Boss Shen's child in the street? Boss Shen is a good woman. She ran a soup kitchen for the whole neighborhood during last year's snowstorm. Nobody's going to stand by and watch this. The people of Suzhou had opinions, and they were sharing them freely. Xiao Jing looked at me surrounded, protected, completely beyond his reach, and understood at last that he had lost every lever he'd ever had over her. Fine. His voice dropped to something cold and calculating, the frenzy in his eyes curdling into something more dangerous. Fine, Shen Jixia. You think one contract can protect you forever? We'll see how this plays out. He snapped his hand in a sharp gesture, turned and retreated into the post station with his guards. The door slammed shut behind him. That night, a torrential rain fell over Suzhou. The rear courtyard of Shen's apothecary was utterly still. Even the night patrol guards were nowhere to be seen. Bang! The main gate was kicked open with brute force. Dozens of shadow operatives in raincloaks poured in like ghosts, fanning out to seal every exit. Steel glinted in the downpour. Xiao Jing strode through the gate in a black combat robe, boots cutting through the standing water. His eyes were red. He looked like a cornered animal that had finally decided to stop pretending. The humiliation at the post station had burned away the last of his restraint. If official authority couldn't hold her, he would use the Marquess's private assassins. He would simply take her. He went straight for the inner chamber, threw back the covers on the canopied bed. Empty, a bolster arranged beneath the quilt to suggest a sleeping figure. Did you really think I wouldn't see through you? A cool voice came from behind him. Xiaojing turned. I was seated in the main chair at the head of the hall, both hands wrapped around a cup of tea. Shen Guizhou stood at my side, unhurried. Nianan had been moved somewhere safe hours ago. Of course you were prepared. Xiaojing laughed a short, ugly sound, and the last pretense fell away from his face entirely. But what does it matter? Do you think Shen Guizhou and a handful of guards can hold off my operatives? He raised his voice. Take her, burn the apothecary. I want to see who dares stop me. The operatives drew their blades and advanced. I didn't move. I didn't even look up. I simply set my teacup down on the table. A quiet, precise click, like a signal. Touch her and you answer to me. The shout came from everywhere at once, tearing through the rain and thunder as though the storm itself had a voice. Then the walls lit up. Torches appeared along every roofline, so many and so close together that they turned the black night into something close to noon, and behind the torches soldiers, hundreds of them, in full armor, crossbows leveled, ringing the courtyard from every direction. Xiaojing and his operatives were surrounded before any of them had time to react. Every bolt was aimed at Xiaojing's head. He went pale. He turned toward the gate. Through the driving rain, a middle-aged general walked into the courtyard. He wore bright lacquered armor and carried at his hip the imperial sword granted only to those with the emperor's personal authority. Each step rang out in the silence. Supreme Commander of the Southern Ocean Fleet, General Pei Zheng. General Pei Xiaojing's composure cracked. He recovered quickly and clasped his hands in a formal salute. I am on imperial assignment. I am in the process of apprehending a fugitive. General, you have surrounded an envoy of the Emperor. What exactly is the meaning of this? The meaning of this. General Pei turned his head and spat on the ground at Xiaojing's feet. Then he pointed a finger directly at his face. Who the hell do you think you are, coming after the woman who saved my life? Xiaojing blinked. Saved your life. 6 months ago, the Southern Ocean Fleet was hit with a poison smoke attack by pirates. A plague tore through the camp. Men were dying by the hundreds. The general's eyes were blazing. It was Boss Shen who developed the antidote and had it delivered to the camp through the night. She saved me and 30,000 of my soldiers. The Emperor issued a personal commendation. She doesn't just hold an imperial supplier's license, she carries a medal of imperial merit. And you, a minor envoy, had the nerve to raid the home of an imperial meritorious subject in the middle of the night. As far as I am concerned, that is treason. The words hit Xiaojing like a physical blow. He stood frozen, staring at me with something that looked almost like awe. He had thought I was a merchant with money and connections. He had no idea that over 3 years I had done far more than build a business. I had used medicine and nerve to weave a web of alliances across Jiangnan that he, for all his power, could not cut through. Take them. The general's arm dropped. The armored soldiers moved in like a tide. Xiaojing's operatives, staring down the barrels of military crossbows, didn't even attempt resistance. They were disarmed and pinned to the ground in seconds. 2 soldiers seized Xiaojing by the arms and forced him to his knees in the mud. No, this can't be. He struggled, his hair coming loose. Every trace of the Marquess's dignity gone. He looked like a stray dog dragged in from the rain. I am the Marquess of Dingbei. I am the imperial envoy. Jixia, tell them I am your husband. Tell them Nianan is my son. I walked out from under the eaves and stood above him in the rain, looking down. Xiaojing. My voice was quiet. You are truly pathetic. I looked at him without hatred, only contempt, the clean final kind, with nothing left underneath it. You thought power was the tool you could use to force my hand. Tonight I'll show you what power actually looks like when it is used properly. I turned to General P.I. General. The Imperial Envoy Xiaojing used private assassins to raid a site critical to military supply, with apparent intent to sabotage the Southern Ocean Fleet's provisions. What does the law prescribe? General P.I.'s hand went to his sword hilt. He drew it halfway. Under the laws of Great Liang conduct equivalent to treason, strip him of the envoy's commission immediately. He is to be bound and escorted to the capital for trial before the Court of Judicial Review. The Dingbei Marquess's estate is to be sealed effective today. No, Jixia. Xiaojing broke completely. He pressed his forehead to the mud. kowtowing in frantic, desperate repetition, the filth mixing with his tears until his face was unrecognizable. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I only wanted to bring you and Nianan home. I only did it because I love. Your love is filthier than the mud you are kneeling in. I crouched down until I was level with him, and I spoke in a voice meant only for the two of us, quiet, unhurried, and absolute. Xiao Jing. 3 years ago, that fire burned the Shen Zixia, who loved you down to nothing. Tonight I take from you your title, your authority, and everything you ever thought made you untouchable. I want you to spend the rest of your life in a prison cell, wide awake, completely lucid, watching me thrive. I stood up. Take him. I turned away without a backward glance. Jixia. The sound that tore out of him was barely human. The soldiers dragged him across the courtyard and out through the gate. His voice carried through the rain-soaked night, growing fainter. And then it was gone. The courtyard fell quiet. The rain eased. The clouds broke apart. A full moon slid out from behind them, clear and bright, flooding the courtyard with silver light. Shen Guizhou came up beside me and settled a warm cloak over my shoulders. "It is over," he said softly. "Yes." I pulled the cloak close. I breathed in the clean air that only comes after rain. Then I turned to look at him, and I smiled the most unguarded, most genuinely light smile I had worn in 3 years. "Guizhou the apothecary has a shipment going out tomorrow. Get some rest." I looked up at the moon for a moment, my voice settling into something calm and certain. "We have a long road ahead of us. All right, Queens, pull up a chair. We need to talk about what just happened, because Shen Jixia didn't just give us a revenge story. She gave us a survival manual. Let us start with Xiao Jing. Here is a man who genuinely believed he was a romantic. He thought that as long as he gave his wife enough face, enough tenderness, and enough eyebrow drawing sessions, he was entitled to keep a hidden lover on the side. When Jixia had a nightmare, he stayed by her bed instead of going to his mistress, and he probably patted himself on the back for it. But Jixia saw right through it. She realized the most terrifying truth about toxic relationships. Sometimes the tenderness isn't love. It is just guilt wrapped in a pretty bow. He wanted the dignity of a proper wife and the thrill of a secret lover, and he expected her to be the blind, obedient puppet that made it all possible. And how did she react? She didn't demand an explanation. This is where I think so many of us get stuck. When we re-betrayed, our first instinct is to confront. We want to scream, we want to cry, we want to make them understand how badly they broke us. We want closure. But Zixia understood something profound. Explaining your pain to the person who willingly caused it is a waste of your breath. Instead of fighting for his conscience, she fought for her freedom. She used those 7 days to quietly gather evidence, secure her escape, and swallow a pill that felt like dying, all so she could actually live now. Let's talk about that scene in the post station 3 years later, because Xiao Jing pulling the look how much I suffered for. Yucard is textbook manipulator behavior. He shows her his ruined hands. He tells her the mistress' baby died. He brags about locking the mistress in a woodshed. He offers up his self-inflicted pain and his cruelty to another woman as currency, hoping to buy Zixia's pity. And her response: "You tore your hands up in the ruins. That was your own foolishness. You tormented Yu Zhao. That was between the two of you. Absolutely iconic. She refused to be the prize he earned through suffering. She looked at this man on his knees and felt nothing, because while he was busy sleeping in ashes and holding on to a burnt bracelet, she was busy building a pharmaceutical empire, saving 30,000 soldiers, and raising her son. Devotion that arrives this late is worth less than weeds. Queens, please write that down. Do not let anyone hand you the bare minimum years after they broke you and expect a standing ovation. You are not obligated to forgive someone just because they are finally hurting the way they hurt you. Jixia didn't win because she got Xiao Jing arrested. She won the moment she realized she didn't need him. She built her own wealth, her own alliances, and her own power, so that when the past finally caught up to her, it couldn't even leave a scratch. If you are dealing with a Xiao Jing right now, someone who gives you crumbs of affection while hiding whole secrets in the dark, stop trying to make them see your worth. Set your teacup down, make your exit plan, and go build your jangnan. The air is so much cleaner once you stop breathing in their lies. Take care of yourselves out there, boss shens.